very much for being here today. I think the first opening remark is that we have now been officially labeled two foxes. We are two foxes that are looking for cunning solutions for Africa's emerging and urgent problems. And we're very, very happy to collaborate, both the Economic Commission for Africa and the IMF. I think historically, the IMF has been known on the continent for a lot of the work that it did during the structural adjustment process. But I think that when you see today Madame Lagarde, you see somebody who is fighting for inclusive growth, for gender equity, for climate change and how Africa can respond to that. The role of the Economic Commission for Africa is really to see how we can domesticate the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, into countries' development plans. And so I think together we can ensure that the macro stability that countries work hard with the IMF to ensure can create enough fiscal space so that we can do the rest of what Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 are asking for. So that's the first message, that we will work together to achieve the global goals that have been put before us both by the continent and the United Nations. The second big discussion that we had today was on demographics and what we can do. And I think that when institutions, big institutions like ours meet, it is important that we begin to look at what are the innovative solutions that we can bring to the continent. The question of demographics has been a big one, continues to be a big one. I think for a long time we've talked about the demographic dividend. We're now asking ourselves, do we still have the dividend, or are we getting into a demographic trap? Which basically means, and as Christine so rightly said today, we look at GDP per capita, we look at issues of inequality, and we look at the Gini index. But even if our countries are growing at 7-8%, which we celebrated for the last 2 decades, with the rate of population growth, we probably need to be doing 15% just to be able to see substantial increases in GDP per capita, and hopefully inclusive enough that we see closes in the Gini index. How are we going to do that? And I think one of the innovative things that we can do is bringing our two institutions together to work on what new models of growth. As journalists on the continent, I think the question that everybody asks is, what are the new models of growth for the continent? We need to grow and respond to the challenges that are ahead of us. The big one is the demographic challenge, and we need to work on that together. A third, and I think a big message, and I think a picture is stronger than 1,000 words, is the women. And to ensure that 50% of our population is able to actively participate in economic activity. And the key point of the speech of Madame Lagarde here today was on ICT. I think that there is nothing that has closed the gap between men and women on the continent today like ICT has. Because of ICT, women, as was said in her speech, have access to bank accounts. Women now have information about market prices. Women are able to sell their goods without the help of an intermediary. See, I'm learning quickly. And so I think bringing together innovation, technology, gender, these are all aspects of Africa's development which we don't believe today are being fully utilized to ensure growth. And the question I think before us is, how can we together as two institutions that help frame the discussion and the narrative around inclusive, sustainable growth, bring those things to bear in the dialogue with our policymakers to make sure that the youth of our continent, as they come forward, can find their own jobs, can employ themselves. We believe that as we go into the next century, many people will be employed at home. Many people will basically be talking about SMEs, and we need to do better ICT, better inclusion, better development, better diversification. We need to be able to add value and add value at different nodes. We cannot all congregate in our urban cities. And so I think that this is really the point of this discussion today, is that the macro and the structural have come together. The questions about growth are not just macroeconomic, they are about structural, they are about people, they are about lives, they are about equity. And I think having us think about that and reflect on what kinds of changes and development we can do together can only be beneficial to the continent.
I was very pleased to come here to the ECA. For the first time, a managing director of the IMF was visiting, and I think it's the first time that two female leaders were addressing this room of African representatives, diplomats, and other luminaries in the room. We focused our remarks on a variety of topics. All of them matters. When Vera talks about demographics, I agree with her. When she talks about the value of trade, I agree with her. When I talk about the harnessing of technology in order to boost trade and in order to facilitate work and employment in different and more creative way, I think we both agree. So joining forces from our various background, environment and missions to focus on the real issues of the continent and on specific countries in particular is certainly a project that I look forward to, and there will be particular topics where we can harness our own skills and expertise, join the ECA's forces, expertise and skills in order to actually identify problems and hopefully propose solutions. Clearly, the demographic impact on some countries when it comes to their growth, their development, reaching the SDGs by 2030 is an area where we can join forces. There are many others as well. But let me just very quickly set back in terms of economic outlook. Vera was talking about these high single-digit growth rates, which are short of delivering on a per capita basis given the demographic phenomenon that we observe in some countries. Well, regrettably, there are quite a few countries on the African continent that are not growing at those rates, and there are many, 17 of them actually, which on a per capita basis are seeing income go down and not go up. So while we are saying that the sun is shining on the global economy, there are too many countries that are also left behind on a per capita basis, and where clearly we have to address their particular concerns and their particular fundamentals to see how we can all help move them towards a better, more sustainable, more inclusive growth going forward, and doing that with a concern about climate change, about gender, about reducing the excessive inequalities in order to harness the potential of the young people on the continent. I think both of us have actually discussed that issue, and to go around from speech to speech advocating the dividend of the African youth is not enough. We really have to identify what tools, what financing, what infrastructure are needed to actually provide the young people of Africa with opportunities. And the demographic concerns that we've just outlined are also part of the background of that discussion. With that, I think I'll be happy to take questions if you have.